At this point, we're now ready to generate the geometry for our backrest and the seat shell so that during render time it will really look like bent plywood with the veneer finishes. The problem I currently have is, as you can see, I have half a model and it's also flat, and my modifier stack creates then the missing half, the thickness, etc. The same is also for here. And that's okay for like modeling purpose, but for render purpose, this object is not suitable. So what I will do is I will make myself a backup copy, move it to a different layer. And I have to get rid of the mirror modifier and the solidify modifier, meaning I will actually first apply the mirror modifier. So I have a full model, and then I will apply the solidify modifier. So now I have also a complete three-dimensional model. And this has advantage now. As you can see, I have a complete band. Okay. But the problem, as you can see, is I will end up with something like this. So all my edges are gone. So how do I fix this? Well, here's a little trick. I need to basically have extra loop cuts along the inside and along the front and back face along the profile I have selected. And there's one very simple and quick process to do it. So what I will do is let's turn all this off. And for example, I will set this to weight, and then this, and this. Let's see, do I have selected all? I do. And let's weight these edges. And then I also bring this one on top. Okay, there, perfect. So first you see this rounds actually these edges, but way too much. I only need 2 segments. So you see 1, 2, and 3. And the trick now is that the profile, maybe here in this mode, it's easier to see. If I go with my profile to 0 or to 1, you see I go concave or convex. And when I go to profile 1, I have actually my original corner back. You see, I bevel this edge and you don't really see anything. But as you can see, I add just perfect loop cuts in this center area. Okay, so, and let's maybe apply, and not apply, turn this on, and there we are back. So if I activate the layer below, you see these objects perfectly overlap. So same geometry. So currently this is 1 millimeter, maybe 2 millimeters. Let's see, then I can soften this edge a little bit more. Yeah, that should actually work well. Okay, and I can keep it for the moment. Let's go to here and we will do the same. So apply, and then this one we will move up. And we'll say 2 millimeters and 2 segments. This goes to profile 1 and weight, and then we have to select these edges as well and give them a weight. And there we are back. Okay. So this is a very, very quick and fast way to create those loop cuts on the sides and then also on the surface. Perfect. Okay. So why was this actually important? Well, the thing is, these flat surfaces, we need to be able to texture just with a side veneer or like a layered texture. And then the front and the back, they will put like the normal veneer texture on. So I only have the ability to, for example, select faces based on, hold on, why doesn't this actually project? Oh, I have my bevel. There. So you see, this is actually what I have to select, and I want to make sure that this selection tries to occupy as much as possible of the site. This maybe right now looks a little bit confusing because one step that's missing is I do not have yet applied my bevel modifier. So I will do this now. So now when I go in, I can select this center loop, and you see actually this is not as wide as the complete site. So here I also have two more face loops, and you see that they nearly occupy the complete width. There is a tiny bevel here, and that's fine because also there would be the other veneer, and we would sand it, we would round this edge. So this is not 100% physically accurate, but for what we will do, this is more than sufficient. I could, if I want, add even more loop cuts to straighten it, but during render time, that's not really going to be that visible. Okay, so let's go to here, and I will do simply the same. This 2mm value actually worked out well. Actually, you know what? Let's go back and do 1mm, just to see how this will look. Okay, so it's a little bit sharper. And so based on what you want, maybe 2 or 1mm, that creases this edge a tiny bit more, maybe 0.5 mm. You see this is way too sharp. If we go 5mm, I see this is way too round. 2mm, 1mm, yeah, 2mm is good. Perfect. Okay, so let's create some basic materials, and I call this one A, and I will make another material, and I will call this one B, and B for the moment I colorize a little bit, and then I assign B to there. And also here let's add A and another material for B, and let's select those and assign. Okay, so now you can visually see what I was talking about. So the top and the bottom face, and then the geometry that defines the sides. And as we can see, this perfectly flows over, not flows over, perfectly stops at this, yeah, at the edge where it should be. Because if we have not enough loop cuts, what might happen is that your side texture will grow into the front, or reverse, your front texture will grow onto the sides, which will make it look that we put a massively thick veneer onto the top, which is not possible and what we want. So it should only be this way. Okay, so that actually for the moment for the computer model. Before we continue, we should take a look at how veneer is made, how it's cut, how it's then put together, and then how we can use that and create the veneer texture. To create veneer, there are 4 different types of so-called cuts: rotary, plane slicing, quarter, and rift cut. Rotary cut is the easiest one. All we need to do is we take a tree trunk, rotate it, and then we take a knife and slice off a continuous stream of veneer. And this process gives you then this nice, wood pattern look. Then we have plane slicing. So instead of the tree trunk rotating, here you see are the rings. We simply move a knife up and down and then slice off sheets of veneer. And the end result will be somewhat parallel lines with those cathedrals. And then the most expensive cut is actually the rift cut. Rift cut is similar to the quarter cut, which means we will cut out a quarter out of the tree trunk, and then with rift we rotate it slightly, and then we just slice off sheets, and you will see that the end result are nice, nearly parallel lines without any cathedrals. Visually, this is very interesting, but also very expensive because this is a more complicated process and we also have more waste. So let's take a look at this image. That actually explains how the different cuts are done again. So rotary, rift, quarter, and plane cut. There you can see the possible veneer outcomes. Talking about waste, this maybe helps to understand waste. So with rotary cut, well, we just use it all up. And then with rift cut, you can see that there are these corners here, similar to quarter. These slices of wood are basically waste. So then when you have these different veneers, the question is now, how do we put them down onto a surface? And there are different matching types. We can have, for example, a book match. You can clearly see the symmetry. So every time when we put another piece down, kind of like how you flip a page of a book, we just flip actually horizontally the veneer, and at each edge the pattern meets, so you get a very strong symmetry effect. The other very common approach is also slip match. So we simply put one sheet next to the other one down without flipping it. Or we can have a random match. So we move them maybe up and down, or make variations to kind of like through the chaos try to hide where actually the different edges are. So let's take a look at some of the images I found. So this one here, you can clearly see this is actually a book match because we can see clearly the symmetry also down here. Also in terms of veneer type, this is probably like a plain slice because we have those cathedrals. We take a look at this one. This probably is a random match because we can see that there are different cuts or types. And 1, 2, and 3 with knots or something, or not knots, cathedrals, and then we have something in between that doesn't show it. And then we take a look at this one. This probably is kind of like the slip match, and we see here a rift cut veneer. So because of the rift cut veneer, also it's very easy to hide the different parts of a veneer or the edges, because well, we only have to deal with vertical lines, and then this chaos or noise and is so much visual distraction that it makes it very difficult to see the individual edges or so. However, based on the type of veneer you use, you can still see maybe a certain pattern. So here on the seat, it's the easiest one to spot. Dark, bright, dark, bright, dark. And also here, there, and there is something similar. And also dark line, bright, dark line, bright, dark line, and then the same here. But you really have to look at it to see it, and it doesn't jump at you, for example, as much as in this image. And that's pretty much nearly everything you need to know about how different veneer types are created. So the most two popular kind of like plane slice, or for example the rift cut, um, or the rotary, and then the different ways of how you could attach veneer together. There are also some additional parts to it which I will leave out, because currently for what we do with the bent plywood, that does not necessarily apply to us. However, this shouldn't stop you from maybe opening a book, or going to the library or to Google and learn a little bit more about veneer making and veneer matching. So now we have to, well, create actually our veneer texture, and what we have to look for is good reference photos or textures that give us enough, let's say, digitized veneer surface, so when we glue it onto our computer model, the veneer doesn't look too big or too small. And here, having those reference photos really helps to understand maybe the scale of veneers, because this is essentially one of the biggest problems we will run into, specifically with chairs, maybe not necessarily, but with furniture or tabletops, because we deal with an object that is multiple inches wide and deep, but very often our textures are kind of like, it's very small, like maybe half a page or so, and then we have to stretch it over a table surface, so that doesn't work. So that's actually one of the tricky thing to do. We have to ideally find a texture or create a texture or scan that is to size, and if that's not possible, try to find a texture that we can scale up to give it the illusion of the correct size. So let's go to Chrome, and for example we can type in wood texture, and then here we will find a lot. Obviously what we want to look for is wood veneer texture. Two things you want to prevent to find, or three. First, images that are close-ups, because then you will stretch a close-up photo all over your object. You want to prevent images that have any highlights or reflections or shadows on it, because that will be on our rendering. And third, you want to prevent using images that are very small. So this one doesn't look too bad, but unfortunately it is not really very big. So it's kind of like 400 by 600 pixels. Ideally, you want to look for something that's maybe around 1,000, 2,000, or bigger is even better. The main reason is the more pixels you have, the crisper the texture rendering will be, because when we zoom in with the camera onto our furniture part, and then a small pixel of the image will look pretty big and everything gets blurry and not very nice. So to repeat it, no reflections, no highlights, no shadows. Try to find an image that shows a texture sufficiently from a distance, best scanned, and also decent amount of pixel size. We can, for example, type in wood veneer sheet. Then you will find a different selection. Let's take a look at what we have here with the zebra wood. That's a pretty crazy material as well. The pattern is really nice. Or maybe go back. What do we have for walnut? So for example here, this is a texture that's pattern-wise not really usable. This maybe, but the file size is too small. This is maybe not too bad, 8 by 1000. This is also size-wise okay, not great, but the detail, you can see how big the pores are. This is not really usable. This rift cut is actually not bad, and this has a pretty good pixel size. So to find maybe only appropriate image sizes, we can turn on the search tools and then go and say, show me only the large stuff. But just again, be careful also with the large stuff. Sometimes you just get close-ups just with more pixels, but we need more surface area. And that's basically then you might have to spend some time to find everything you need or go to different websites. Specifically at the beginning, when you're new to it, you might not have texture, but over time, the more you do it, the more you find. I have one folder where over the years I accumulated all the different veneer types or wood patterns, and as well make use of just Google furniture to get an idea of maybe how stuff has to look and how big something can be, kind of like here, so that it gives you a good reference for, well, how big textures have to be. Okay, so that for finding textures. Now, how do we create actually the texture? So that we will end up with something like this, where we have the different layers and we have the top and bottom veneer. So I also went to Google and typed in bent plywood, and I found some textures like this, and it shows you, for example, the layered stuff. And here I have one that I created for a client, that we had a very specific number of layers, so I just recreated exactly these layers. And again, these images really help well to understand and count. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, kind of like 7 layers, plus minus. Okay, so I will use this texture and then this bent plywood and create a texture for Photoshop. For Blender in Photoshop, and that can be used. So this one I will rotate 90 degrees. Okay, and this is actually decently large, but not wide enough. So I will now create myself a pattern. So 17 inches, let's make this 16 inches wide. Then I can make another copy and, for example, move it over. Let's see how far this maybe might fit. Yeah, okay. Good. Well, this image is not really wide enough, so let's make this maybe 19 inches because I need a small strip now also for my bent plywood. So let's go to there. Let's copy this one, paste it in. There you can see how big in relationship, for example, this bent plywood texture is compared to the veneer. And then I can rotate this one, yeah, and just leave it there. I'm not going to do anything more with it. Or if I want to, this maybe might not be a bad idea. I could, let's see if those actually will match up. Yeah, the lines are not too bad. So I would like to have a layer mask for this one. And then I will create a small gradient inside this layer mask. Whoops, wrong direction. There. So that actually these edges blend together a little bit. And the main reason why I do this right now is I just create myself a bigger texture. Control E or Apple E. So I merged it, and then let's bring this one down here. This one also gets a layer mask. So the more pixels I have, the better I can then map the complete length onto my geometry. So it will look better. There. Okay, perfect. So on this one, maybe I can get closer, and then if I want, let's trim it. Okay, so this image I will export. You can use PNG or JPEG. If you use JPEG, really use maximum quality. So Veneer and maximum. Don't show me a preview, don't need it. Okay, ooh, 10 megabyte. That's a big image. Okay, so here's now my veneer texture. So in Blender now, I actually do not need two different materials like what I have here. I simply added those two materials so I could color code the edges for you. But I will remove the material and make a new wood material. Okay, and then let's say for the moment this should be an image. Open. Where's my veneer? There. Okay, great. So I have to do now a UV unwrapping. So before I do this, let's select all those loops, and then also down here I have to select these two edges. So these two edges here are there where my side texture will connect, and there we will see a seam. There's pretty much no way to prevent it otherwise, or the only way to maybe do it correctly would be then in Photoshop, and then each side of my Photoshop texture here has to be exactly the same. Then maybe the pieces will blend together. If you want to. If you don't need to, no, you don't have to do it in Photoshop because this edge is below. Most times the camera will never look up, so we will never see it. And generally in digital rendering, what you don't see, simply don't do, because it would be wasted time. With these edges selected, we can press Ctrl E and say mark seam. And then there you see now the seam we have. I will actually open my UV editor here and then load that veneer there. And AA, U, and unwrap. And there's now my unwrapped geometry. Okay, so what do we see? Well, here's actually my band for my side veneer. And on the left down there, that's actually the shell. This image is really large, which is why actually Blender is currently a little bit choking on this. So what I will do is I will, 5,000 pixels. I will make myself a smaller version there and save this one. And we call this one Veneer Preview. So I will have a small preview version to work with, and Blender won't choke as much, and then when we do the actual rendering, we simply swap it out to the high-res version. So where's my veneer small? There, okay. Let's load it. And veneer preview. Nope, not startup. Yeah, there. Okay, great. Now we can zoom in much faster. Perfect. Okay, so this band with L, select R and 90, we rotate it, and then we can scale it down. We'll move it over, and then what did we say, like 7 layers something. Okay, so S and X, move it apart, and then S and Y, let's scale it up so it tries to include as much of my texture geometry as possible. There, and maybe for the moment I'll leave it there. And then this one, Control M and Y, I could maybe rotate it, match these two, move them to here. So now I have to figure out, this is actually my center line, if I will maybe have a veneer piece that is centered or not. Oh, I guess not. And I can scale this one up. So the bigger actually the mesh on the image, the more of the underlying texture will be put onto the geometry. Okay, so here, for example, now we can turn on material. And there we see it. No? Perfect. Really nice texturing. Also doesn't look too big. That's not an issue. Maybe the color, this maybe we should later desaturate a little bit. It's a little bit too yellowish. Okay. Good. So let's do the same with this part here. So also there, this should be wood. Then we have to select all these edges here. Also, whoops, there. Control E, mark seam, AA, unwrap, and then let's go to the UV editor, and there's a little bit more cleanup we have to do. So you see these edges decided to move up. I simply say no to that. So Alt or Control left click onto an edge, S and Y to scale them. There's also an align tool, but S and Y does it. Okay, LR90, S and Y to scale it down, move it over, and then we just do exactly the same here. This actually, the top, I want to make sure that this is flat, so S and Y, S and Y. Okay, and then let's try to scale it so that they're pretty close to the edge. Maybe scale them apart a little bit. I haven't really counted the numbers yet because this is a preview image right now. It's a little bit tricky to be precise with the amount of rings we use there, and then select this and move it over, scale it up. There, bigger, there. Okay, let's take a look. There. Okay. So because we used twice the same texture for the top and the bottom, obviously we'll see the texture on each the same. Also, be careful with the size. You see here I made the UV editor the size of my seed on purpose smaller so that the texture is much bigger. So be mindful of the size and the proportion. So maybe to have a little bit of variation, this one I move to there. This actually is maybe a little bit smaller and I move it to there. So I can give the illusion of maybe two different actual veneer parts by not having the patterns be exactly the same. Okay, and then what we have to do at one point to make sure that also the width inside our UV editor is exactly what we need for our product, so that the meshes for the backrest and the shell here are equally wide and cover the same amount of steps. So I mentioned before, this is a little bit too yellowish maybe in my opinion, so let's maybe select this part and let's see if maybe we can add a small color effect to it. Actually, I will just do it directly in the image. There. I want to desaturate it actually slightly. Yeah, let's go with saturation. Maybe like this. Okay, good. Oh, and this is actually the preview one. Oh, that's not the one I wanted to work with. So, nearly destroyed my original image. So let's step back and step back till I have my my big version again. There. So the saturation actually worked out. Can we make this a little bit more reddish? You can also play with the hue a little bit, maybe. Maybe make it a little bit brighter. Yeah. It should be more reddish or yellowish. Okay. Let's compare. This is better. Okay, good. So, you know what I will do? I will do the following. I will make a copy there, and then this part I will flip. So, transform flip vertical. Okay. And then I will add a layer mask, and then inside this layer mask, please. Come on, what are you doing? Okay, Photoshop is a little bit interesting right now. Okay, this, oh, it added a vector mask. Okay, wah wah, ching. There, add, there, thank you. I have no idea how I created that vector mask. Tuck. So you see now the top and the bottom are exactly the same because I just mirrored it. And if we want to, we could maybe do and trim actually this part a little bit more down. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. No, so maybe till, let's say maybe till there. So essentially this could be actually all we need. So it's up to you how you want to work. If you want to maintain more material, so in case you have to move stuff around, or if you simply want to adjust it. Photoshop's zooming effect is really annoying. I hate this software. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So let's say we go till there, maybe there. Okay, like this, because then actually adjusting the sideband texture will be maybe a little bit easier. So this one again I will save as first as a Photoshop, so it is saved, and then I will save this as, oh, it's still saving. Okay, save as a Veneer JPEG. Okay, yeah, 10. Okay, and then we do the same again adjust the image size to 1000 pixels. Actually, I will go height 1000. Okay, and let's save that as Veneer preview. Okay, good. So here now, Alt and R, I just reload actually the updated Veneer preview. So you see that my mesh here is misplaced. So now I can actually do a little precision adjustment. So I will turn on my UV snap to pixels. So it perfectly snaps to that point. Cursor to selected, select everything, snap, no, cursor to selected, L to select everything. We have 2D cursor and then S and X, and I move it till I get actually this line there. Okay, and then also here S and Y till it ends actually at the last point. Perfect. And then I will do the same. Take a look at this there. So UV editor, select all this and move it to there, S and X there, and let's go to the end, S and Y. Okay, zoom out. You know what, just for giggles, let's take a look at the bottom. And where are the seams? There are no seams because we photoshopped them out. So perfect. Take that, key short users. That's the way how stuff is done. Okay, I always can't resist a little bit of pun to the easy folks. Okay, I would say actually the UV texturing and the texture generation for the basic wood and then the veneer is done. So let's actually do some preliminary test rendering to see how everything fits. And I think I spotted a small flaw here. Yeah, so there, this is not very good. The veneer shouldn't end there this way. There it is. Okay, so what I will do is go into edit mode and let's take a look at the veneer preview. Oh yeah, there. So this corner here, maybe I will move everything a little bit to there. Yeah, so you see this part now got cleaned up. There I bring in a different veneer, nothing I want. There. Okay, a little bit of trickery. Good. So, one small tip up front before we go into more the materials. So let's take a look from this camera. Or you know what? No, I will just simply zoom in by hand and get very close. So maybe this detail here. So this is the preview texture. The thing is, it's a small image. It loads really fast. It doesn't use up a lot of memory. That's very good. Problem is because it is low texture, low resolution, and the texture quality is not very good when we zoom in. So when this is my object, the material, I can actually do this if I want. I can make a copy of this texture input. And then here I load my regular veneer high-res image. Have this inside my material, and then I can, when I need, for example, load the higher quality image, which requires a little bit more memory. but then as you can see already, the result is stunningly better. Okay, so let's go and take a look how these two things compare. So where's my preview? It's here. So this is the high res, and this is the high res, this is the low res. And you can easily see how the preview image is very blurry, and here you can still see even all the pores. So this is very important because we have to create also the texture for the bump mapping and the roughness from this image. But because I do not want to have to create different textures for high res and low res, we can do everything in Blender. So let's actually go back to Blender, and what we do first is this should maybe be a high glossy finish. So I will continue working with the preview version. So when we want a glossy coat over it, we need to have a mix shader, and then we can add a glossy. For the moment I may set this to 0 there, and then let's add a Fresnel by using the layer weight 0.2 and there. So currently this looks very much like it's plastic, and there's like a print below that gives you the feeling that there is some sort of wood texture. We could maybe roughen this up 0.01 or maybe 0.05, 0.01. Yeah, here, there, it does not look too bad. This is maybe a little bit too much. No, we keep it this way. Okay, so basic material, a glossy film over, and then via the layer weight we can decide at how much, for example, the reflection will be there based on our view angle. But let's say I would like to tone down the strength of the reflection in addition. So we can add, again, a multiply value between the layer weight and then the mix shader for the factor. So what just basically means we use this blend 0.2 for the layer weight, and then the effect we multiply by 0.5, which means 50%. So now if you have set this to 0, it's basically this effect multiplied by 0 equal no effect. If we say 1, this is this effect multiplied by 1, so it's 100%. So think about this multiply really as 1 is 100%, 0 is 0%, and then based on what you put in between, this is now like 25%. So you see, the geometry of the reflection we do not change, we simply tone this effect up and down. So we can lower the strength of the reflection. Also, we can go the opposite and, for example, increase this if we want. And there you still see that it's very reflective, but even here it's not, because based on this layer weight, this area hardly gets any reflection. Okay, so those are for the moment the most important building blocks, the basic ones: diffuse, glossy, layer weight, and then a multiply. The next step we have to take a look at is bump mapping. Again, to understand really what you have to do, the easiest thing is look up actual references. So here we can see what we have to aim for. There is kind of like a matte reflectivity happening. It's blurry. And then there you see where we have those pores, the reflectivity is broken up because there's actual, well, depressions on the surface, so it's not like a flat polished surface anymore. If we go to here, we can see this pore effect even more. Then wherever we have these small tiny pores going into the wood, there is no reflectivity. Here, this area is, for example, interesting, where patches are nicely reflective and then stuff is kind of like broken up. And even in the distance here, we can see and spot the bump mapping. Let's see if we have something there. Now this actually looks, we can see a little bit there, but it's also kind of like a matte glossy finish, and then some, based on the material, there's a little bit of bump mapping. Yeah, this is too far away. So how does the bump mapping actually work? So we can have a texture like this, and then this is basically what we have to use as a bump map. So it's kind of like a black and white image. The white, let's say, goes up and the black goes down, if you want to think about it this way. So that's the reason why we have to work with pure white and pure black, and then the gray scale steps in between. That will then define the bump mapping. And we can, based on a texture image, create a bump map quite easily. Very often this will actually look pretty convincing by simply clamping the values down. So kind of like a medium dark gray, we make a black, and a medium bright gray will set to a white, so we get those high contrast images. But because we work actually with two veneers, like a full version and a preview, I don't want to have to do this each with each texture image, because we also have to do the same for the reflectivity, for the roughness. We will do this directly in Blender, and there are multiple ways how you can do it. So to see this effect better, I will actually continue working with my high-res version. Okay, so first let's add actually the bump map. So there, and we connect it, maybe 0.1, and then this one we can drag into the height, but this is actually a colored image, so we will convert this to black and white by adding an RGB to black and white converter node in between. Then let's turn on our rendering, and it will be easier to preview this bump effect when we simply turn off the diffuse mix in. And let's zoom in, and there we can see it. Also here, just for reference, let's swap in the preview node. You will see it is pretty blocky, and then with that other texture, the high-res image, so much more detail. Okay, so that's not too bad, but kind of like that bump mapping is all over the place. That's not really what I want. If maybe I set this to 0.5 or 0.2, we can see that even more. So now I have to figure out what's the best way to clamp actually this texture, so only in certain areas I will see the bump mapping. And we can add a color and then a gamma node. Put this actually between the black and white and the bump. And this one, for example, we can maybe increase 0.2, 0.3, 0.4. And if you pay attention to, you start seeing that certain areas become flat and nicely reflective. So we actually clip these values out there. So 0.4. It feels to me this bump mapping actually is inverted, so instead of being pressed in, it actually comes up. So let's add an invert. Can put that in between wherever we want. Oh, okay. That's not the effect I wanted. Control X. Let's see, invert. Oh, this is interesting. I never tried this there. I thought this could work, but it does not. Okay, and let's add the invert to there. Okay, so one way, other way, there you see this actually looks more like pores being pushed in, and here something comes up. Okay, good. Maybe from a different view. Yeah. So the bump mapping also will be only really well visible based on the view angle you have, and also where you have something to reflect on the object. Oh, look, this is really beautiful here. Also, from this angle, this looks really nice because there you can see when it gets cleaner how we have the normal flat areas and then the bump. So you see if we set this to 0, this looks like super plastic, and then there's kind of like some grooves cut in, or we can fine tune this maybe for smaller bump mapping values, so just strength 0.1, 0.2, yeah, and this is too reflective, so 0.05. We actually get something that's very close to this image here. Glossy, slightly rough reflection, and then this bump mapping. And again, to see the bump maps really well, you ideally want to have something to reflect across the surface. So kind of like this, my object, and there's a light behind, so I can see it. Or maybe the way how something is angled, then I can see the reflection. Otherwise, you will not see the bump mapping. This is very often a mistake beginners do. They play with these values and they want to see the bump mapping, but based on how you're illuminating your object, you won't really see it well. Okay, so now when we bring actually this back, then also we partially will hide actually this bump map effect. So it's still there, but actually the texture hides it a little bit. If we go maybe to this view, we can at one point start spotting it there again. So in such situations, if you want to show it more, we can maybe artificially then increase the bump mapping. So this might not be physically correct, but you know, it comes down to what do you want to storytell through your photo. Do you approach rendering based on physical accuracy, or do you approach rendering based on maybe what you want somebody to perceive? Okay, so we can actually maybe leave it at this. So grayscale, and then we, with the gamma node, actually adjust, for example, the black and white, and we clip it, and then with the invert we can flip that image, so actually we have the correct bump direction. Actually, I'm a nerd. There's the invert button built in. Wah, wah. Sorry, overlooked it. Old habits sometimes die hard. So there, yeah, and we can do it directly this way. Perfect. Okay, nicely, because we did it for this material, this also applies to that material. So that did it at once. So now the next thing maybe to look at is currently we just have a uniform roughness here. So we could also add actually or feed an image into the roughness value so that the reflectivity is also affected. So let's take a look how this might work. Go back to this view because I see a lot of different reflections, and for the moment I want to disconnect this, and then this I simply feed in because I'm curious what we will see. Okay, not much. What do we see there? A lot more. So if we zoom in, you can see the different roughness values. So some are more, some are smaller, some are bigger. So we have a different set of reflections or strengths. So here, for example, this looks pretty nice. So to control this a little bit more, we can also there add a gamma node, and with 1 we are back to where we were. With 2 or 3, now we can actually play with this a little bit. There, that's not too bad. So it's not a bump mapping, it's simply, when we zoom in more, you can see where the bumps might be. It is also roughened up more there. Because essentially a wood surface is not like glass, so it's not perfectly smooth, so the reflection cannot be perfectly the same. It has to be roughed up a little bit. This is maybe too much. 1.25, 1.5. Yeah, maybe like this. Well, not too bad actually. This works pretty well. So let's say we set this to 2, and you see at one point this gets pretty clean there. We set this to 4, razor sharp, 3, yeah. I was just curious if we do something like this, and then this we feed into a color mixer, so a mix RGB. You might ask yourself, well, why would you do this? So this goes into the factor. So we have, for example, black, and we have white as 2 different values. So one, for example, being very clean and one being very rough, or polished and rough. And I was just curious if maybe this way we could mix, or so we create a mask that decides what, for example, should be polished or what should be roughed up, and then with these values we can decide how much something will actually be rough or not. So the first one, as we can see now, that actually defines the clarity. So black is perfectly smooth, no roughness, so roughness of 0, and then white is the opposite. So you see, if I set this to black, everything is perfectly smooth. So in this way you can see I can create myself a mix between those 2 textures, so where something should be rough and not, and then with this mixer override it in addition if needed. You see there, this is nice and detailed, and here this is a little bit more simplified, more toned down. So you see I overrode that image a little bit. If I set this to white, and I think this now should exactly be more or less nearly the same. Yeah. Okay. I can continue playing with this, and again, always get an actual piece or a photo, try to understand what you see, and then we can rebuild it. And let's patch in now our bump mapping, and you will see that the bump mapping gets close to where actually those roughness pores are. So the bump mapping maybe is a tick too coarse. Sorry, not too coarse, too small. So 5.5. Obviously we're zoomed in here a lot, so quality is pretty terrible, but from a distance it looks much better. 0.2 there. Okay, so That's kind of like a quick way how to have only one input image, and then we create not only the colored texture look, but we can then also create the individual roughness for the glossy, and then also the three-dimensional structure so that the reflections also are broken up. And just to show you how flexible this process is to generate one Photoshop file, and then we do all the rest actually in Blender, so we don't have to go forward and backwards creating different images. I will create a new texture based on the same layout. So my veneer for the front, and then actually my side veneer. And this I will export as another veneer type. Maybe 10 there, okay. And let's go to Blender here. So I will keep this one simply linked, but I would like to load in the different texture, veneer type 2 there. And let's take a look how this, for example, would work out. So we would have to put this one into the diffuse for the color, and then we also have to put this one into this part so we can create all the required structures for the bump mapping and roughness. Let's take a look how this feels. That's pretty good. I would like this one to be a 55, so it's not so fisheye. Yeah, nice. So I feel like I don't have to adjust many of these values. I can simply keep it. And there you see that it was basically just a mouse click, and I have completely swapped out the veneer type of the wood, while I don't have to redo all this other stuff. So this is a pretty flexible process. You will see you might have to set up the node system at first, but think about it like as an automated process, and then afterwards it's basically click 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 and it's all done. So to finish this preview rendering, let's take a look at the materials. So we do some pretty basic metal, so glossy, that one here, this should be metal as well. Same with this one and this one. There are the screws there and there and there. Shift click this one, Control L, make links to the material. There, all those are in. Now we have to work on the gliders. So let's say we make those kind of like blackish. So let's bring this down a little bit. There's no pure black and pure white in CG and in the world, so just work with values in between. Then we will add a mix, and we will add a glossy there, and we can add a layer weight there. Okay, so let's see what layer are those in. I will restructure my scene for the moment. All this I will put onto a different layer, layer 1. You as well. Okay, there. And then the shell I want to be gone, so I can focus actually on the frame and the pipe stuff. So let's finish actually the plastic first. Is this material? Yeah, so there. Plastic. Whoops. Good. So how does this stuff actually look? There again, let's go to the web and let's look at how are they called? Charles Eames replacement parts. Let's see if we can maybe find it somewhere. There we have something. There we can see, for example, how these pieces look like, how glossy they might be, or how not. So, for example, those pieces, as we can see, they are very, very reflective. If we go to those casters, you can see that the sides are actually roughened up, so there's a noise bump mapping happening on it. Oh, look at there. There's a nice image. So they're actually not very polished. There seems to be also different types. Those are more polished, those are less polished. Now the thing is, we don't really know how much something, for example, is touched up or photoshopped or color adjusted. They look rather diffuse, but there's also an interesting coloring going on. So maybe let's do something like this. So it's not so plain, yeah, uniform color-wise. Okay, so how could we maybe add a little bit of noise stuff to it? What I will do for the moment, I will remove the rest, so I only see this, and then I will add a color mixer there, maybe between like a medium and dark. Okay, and I would like to blend between or mix between these two colors by using a texture. Maybe let's see how the noise maybe could work. So the factor goes in there. There we see a little bit of cloudiness. See, it's not too bad. So let's add this back and let's take a look. Yeah, see, this actually feels nicer than when it's just so boringly uniform. We could maybe adjust the size a little bit more. Probably what we have to do is also adjust the mapping. I will drag in the white because you can see at the side this is wrong. The top has a bigger texture scale, so we have to add a texture coordinate, and then we can simply say object and 100 200. That's maybe too much. 50 80. Whoops, 80, not that there. Okay, now the sides are also correct, and then copy and paste that color back in. Maybe this can be a tick brighter, and this a tick brighter. Let's go back to there. Yeah, I see it's a little bit bluish. Maybe the scale actually can be 100 or 200. So based on the reference you have, you can play with it. And there. Oops. Let's bring this one back in. There we have it. So, not sure if this should really be that rough. 0.05. That's too glossy. 0.1. Maybe rotate a little bit. Look from a different position. Yeah, that's good. But I feel it is too reflective. So also here I add a math function to just tone it down a little bit. Okay, so that, for example, for those rubber parts. And We can keep the same also from there, or maybe we say those are rubber discs, and here spacebar, not spacebar, click on the number, those, let's call this maybe plastic glossy, and we will do something similar here. So let's take a closer look. So this should actually be rather nicely polished. So 0.05 there. That's okay. Value 1. So because this is actually more plastic, so the reflection might look a little bit stronger. Let's also link the materials, and then maybe we can add a little bit of a bump structure to the normal. So convert their bump 0.1 to their factor into the height. So then this one has to be much bigger, so 800, still too small, 1500, ugh, 3000, yikes, 5000. Okay, good. And maybe this is a tick too strong, 0.05, so you can just see it. So this is, for example, an effect I will only turn on in the rendering when I zoom in, because from there we hardly really will see it. So in a close-up, have this in, and when we show it from here, because you don't see it, we don't need to calculate it, we can just turn it off. Okay, so nearly done with our first stuff. The only thing that's maybe missing is, yeah, that metal frame looks kind of funny, because if we zoom in, we have the reflection of the highlights, the ground, and then this whole band here is black. Also, I use a little background, so it's not pure black, but a little bit warm black there. And so how do we fix this? I need something in the reflection there. So, well, welcome to Cycles and this awesome tools of ray visibility things. So this one first to 0. So -90. Okay, now this blocks actually my view. So I will set this object to wireframe. So there it is, like this. And then don't show in the camera, don't emit light, just be visible in the reflections. And now when I zoom in, you see there we have actually another piece. And then based on where, for example, I move this part to, maybe to there or to there, you can see we can play with the content of the reflection. Something I very often see being ignored, that they don't pay attention to, that you need to have stuff also in your reflections. I'm not sure if the piece is maybe too big, so let's maybe scale this down to make it thinner. Let's take a look. Yeah, so even with the size we could play what happens if we scale this one down. Yeah, we can even do it there. So for example, to there it fades out to the bottom of my leg, but that's not what I want, so I keep it this way, how it was. Yeah, okay, and then let's show the wood frame. Oh, doesn't look too bad, pretty respectable. And also you can see I currently use the camera film to again just post-process this photo a little bit to make it nice and crisp, so I don't have to do all that stuff in Photoshop. A side view, so maybe a little intro about illuminating it. So a nice light from the right shines light onto the sides. Then this is, for example, the way how it might really make sense to understand what you're doing. So you see you can hide actually different lights. So you always see maybe from where do they affect your object. Then now I see what reflection inside my final rendering comes from what light source. So this reflection comes mainly from this object. So when you place your camera onto the object, you might then have to move these light emitters around till you get, for example, nice reflections. I'm not sure if I really like this here currently being that dark and then it's highlighted. So I'm curious if maybe by moving this to somewhere else, if I can fill it. I guess I cannot. Yeah, this is too big even when I get it very close. Yeah. I might then, what happens if I rotate the camera? Yeah, there actually, no, I can get it close to fill there. But no, the camera focuses at the center there. So let's see when I bring this one back to there or there to center it. Yeah. So different ways how you can try to adjust your rendering, or how you have to design your shot, move your objects, move your lights, pay attention to the reflections, etc. Okay.